Blood smeared across the canyon stone, like a promise no one meant to keep. The woman ran, her breath ragged, her legs stumbling over scrub and shale, every footstep a whisper against a land that once knew her kin. Sand clung to her bare ankles. The sun, dipping low behind rust-red cliffs, threw a shadow long and thin across the earth. She gripped the torn edge of her shawl to her ribs, where blood soaked the weave in dark, wet silence. Behind her, distant hooves, maybe 3 riders, maybe more. She didn't look back. Wind lifted her long black hair, wild and sweat-matted, and flung it into her face. Her eyes, dark as river stone and sharp with pain, scanned the landscape like a cornered doe. No tree cover, no place to hide but stone and dusk. She pressed herself into a crevice between boulders and slid down, hand to her wound, heart pounding against her ribs like a drumbeat of defiance. The land knew her. It had held her once, when she was a child with feathers in her braid, and a brother who still lived. It had sung to her. Now it only held its breath. From the ridge above, Colt Merrick watched. He'd been tracking mule deer, bows slung across his shoulder, rifle unused. His horse, a chestnut gelding with one lazy eye, grazed behind him. But the moment he saw her stagger into view, small, wounded, and wrapped in silence like armor, he stopped moving. She didn't see him. She wouldn't have trusted him if she did. He recognized the shawl pattern. Apache, older weave, sun-bleached, likely woven by someone long gone now. He had no business stepping into this. Not anymore. His days of drawing lines between good men and bad had ended with the war, and left him unsure which side he'd ever been on. But she collapsed behind the rocks. Not fell, collapsed, like a story whose last page had been torn out and scattered to the wind. Colt tugged the reins loose from a mesquite branch and guided his horse down slowly, not rushing. No sudden movements. Let her hear him. Let her decide. The woman didn't cry out. Her body had the stillness of prey that knows it's been seen, but not yet taken. When he rounded the rock and stopped a few feet away, he didn't speak, just lowered his canteen to the dirt between them. She didn't move. Her hand was pressed against her side, blood seeping between her fingers. Eyes locked on his, fierce, tired, wary. He saw the question there, unspoken. Will you finish what they started? He knelt without a word, then sat cross-legged, just far enough that she could bolt if she needed to. He laid his rifle beside him, but first, slow and easy, unthreatening. His hat he kept on, brim low, face calm. The kind of calm that didn't come from peace, but from too many years of surviving war. Minutes passed like that, just wind and breath, and two people trying to measure whether trust could fit between them. She reached for the canteen, didn't drink it right away, held it first, like she was checking for poison or lies. Then she tilted it to her lips and drank, slow. Water dribbled down her chin and vanished into the cloth around her throat. Name's Colt, he said softly. She didn't answer. Not looking to hurt you. Her fingers curled tighter around the canteen. He nodded once, as if to say fair enough, then looked out toward the horizon. The torchlight was faint, but rising. 3, maybe 4 men. Bounty hunters, likely. Or law. Sometimes the two were the same out here. He didn't ask what she'd done. Didn't care. After a while, she set the canteen down, then tried to rise. Her leg gave out under her, and she crumpled against the rock, teeth clenched. He rose immediately, hands out, not to touch her, but to offer. She waved him off, pride in every flick of her wrist. Still wouldn't speak. But she didn't stop him from retrieving his bedroll and laying it near her. Not touching, just close. Then he unhitched a blanket from his saddle and placed it at the edge of her reach. The moon had just begun to rise when she crawled toward it. Colt sat watch beneath a juniper tree, knees drawn up, one hand resting near his rifle but not gripping it. His eyes stayed on the trail below, not on her. If she slipped away in the night, he wouldn't stop her. But if those riders came, he'd be ready. She slept lightly, twitching now and again, muttering in a language he didn't understand. Names, maybe. Ghosts. A coyote howled in the far distance. Wind rattled the brush. The desert turned silver under moonlight, and for a moment it looked almost holy, like this place, this hollow, had been waiting for both of them. For years, Colt didn't sleep. His mind returned to other faces. A Lakota boy he hadn't saved. A woman who had begged him not to take her husband. Orders. Always orders. And now this, a woman hunted not for a crime, but for being born to a name men wanted to erase. He'd been the kind who erased once. But not tonight. At some point near midnight, the woman stirred, pushed herself upright with a pained grunt, and met his eyes for the first time without fear. She studied him like she could see everything inside him. She looked at him like no one had in years. Not with kindness, not with hate, but with judgment. Like she knew what he'd done before he ever opened his mouth. And still, she didn't run. He nodded slightly, the gesture small, but heavy with meaning. Her head tilted, acknowledging it. From the far ridge, a single torchlight swayed. Closer now. Maybe a mile. Colt whispered to the night, barely louder than breath. They'll be here by sunup. The woman said nothing, just reached behind her, drew a small blade from beneath her shawl, and placed it gently beside her in the sand. Not to threaten, to prepare. Colt smiled just a little, not because he was glad, but because he knew right then she wouldn't die lying down, and neither would he. He slid one cartridge into the chamber, slow and quiet, the sound a click in the stillness, and the torchlight kept coming. The canyon cut to the land like a scar, deep and ancient, carved not by time but by memory. Wind moved through its ribs with a hush, as though the earth itself had secrets it didn't dare speak aloud. Colt led the horse slowly through the narrow pass, his boots stirring loose stone. The morning sun hadn't yet reached the canyon floor, and shadows wrapped around them like a second skin. Naira rode behind him, her weight slumped but steady, her fingers gripping the worn leather of the saddle. She hadn't spoken since sunrise. The trail was one Colt remembered from a time when he'd been someone else, when he'd worn gray and followed orders that stained his hands. He hadn't come this way in years, but the shape of it had stayed lodged in the back of his mind like a shard of glass. The bends, the water hidden beneath smooth stone, the ledge where a man could hide and see everything without being seen. Her breathing was uneven. He heard it each time the horse stepped over a rut or dipped into the trail. Shallow, strained. She was hurt worse than she let on. When they reached the spring, just a dark slit in the canyon wall, barely wide enough for light, he halted. We'll stop here. She slid off the horse with a wince, legs trembling as she caught herself. Blood had soaked the shawl tighter to her skin, darker now, nearly black where it pooled near her hip. Still, she didn't ask for help, didn't even look at him. He filled a tin cup from the spring and handed it to her without a word. She took it, drank, and dropped to her knees by the water's edge. Her reflection rippled out of shape as she leaned forward, hands pressed into the cold stone. Colt pulled out his knife and cut strips from the clean edge of his shirt. He didn't ask, just crouched beside her and held one out. She didn't reach for it. Why? Her voice was hoarse, smoke and sand and suspicion. He looked at her, really looked, the way her jaw stayed clenched even in pain. The old scar across her collarbone, faded and white, like something she didn't remember getting. The question wasn't just about now. It was about everything. Because someone should have said no, he answered. Back then. Back when? She asked, still not touching the cloth. When it started, he said, quietly. When we stopped seeing people and started counting land. She watched him for a long moment, then reached out and took the strip. The touch of her fingers was dry, light as birdsong. He helped her peel back the shawl. The wound beneath was ragged. A bullet had grazed her side and torn through the flesh, angry and red. It wasn't fatal. Not yet. But left alone, it would rot her from the inside. She tensed as he cleaned it. Didn't cry out. Not once. Just pressed her palm against the ground and stared into the earth as if it owed her an explanation. You ever kill someone? She asked suddenly. Colt didn't lie. Yes. Apache? Yes. She turned her face away. He thought she might spit at him or reach for the blade she still carried. But she didn't. She just closed her eyes and said nothing. He tied the cloth around her ribs and sat back. His hand smelled of blood and spring water. The canyon wind cooled the sweat at his temples. She didn't open her eyes, but he felt something shift between them, like a brittle branch bowing just slightly under the weight of snow. What's your name? he asked after a while. She hesitated. Then, Naira. He nodded once, the sound of it quiet in the hush of the canyon. Colt. A falcon circled above the rim, crying into the empty blue sky. Naira looked up, lips moving in a whisper too soft to catch. She touched 2 fingers to her heart, then the sky. A prayer. Colt asked. A memory, she replied. He didn't press. She lay back against the stone, the edge of her braid touching his boot. Her breath came slower now, but steadier. He sat near her, not watching her, but not looking away either. He could feel the world folding tighter around them, the canyon's walls growing steeper, the passage narrowing. When he finally spoke again, his voice barely disturbed the air. I was 19. They told us to burn the winter camps. Said it was mercy. Her eyes flicked toward him. She didn't interrupt. There were children, he said. 1 boy. He ran out of the fire. I could have stopped him or helped him, but I didn't move. I just stood there, watching. He didn't look at her. Didn't need to. The shame sat heavy enough between them. Naira said nothing for a long time. Then, we bury our dead facing the sunrise, so they can walk into light. Colt exhaled through his nose. That boy deserved that. He didn't die for a nation, she said. He died for a mistake. They sat with that truth. Neither tried to soften it. The light shifted slowly. Shadows crawled across the canyon like old ghosts finding their way back home. Naira adjusted her shawl and eased herself upright, shoulders drawn but no longer shaking. Her strength wasn't in her body. It was in the way she didn't beg. She looked at him now without flinching. He wasn't a hero. She wasn't a victim. They were 2 broken truths, side by side, in the mouth of something older than law. A pebble skittered down the canyon wall behind them. Colt turned, eyes narrowing. Then he heard it, faint but unmistakable. Hooves. Somewhere above. They'd found the trail. He stood quickly, scanned the rim, then looked at her. She was already on her feet, favoring her left side, eyes sharp again. How many ways out? She asked. 1. Then we ride. He helped her into the saddle without hesitation. Her hands gripped the horn tight, teeth clenched, face pale but set. He mounted behind her, guiding the horse into motion, hooves clattering lightly against rock. As they vanished deeper into the canyon, Colt looked back once. Torchlight danced faintly at the rim. The hunt hadn't ended. But this time, she wasn't running alone. Rain came in slow, deliberate drops. At first, it was only the smell of it, wet stone, sagebrush, and sky heavy with promises long withheld. Then the wind shifted, and the clouds opened like an old wound. Colt lifted his collar as thunder grumbled low, distant but crawling closer, and reined in a horse at the canyon's mouth. Naira leaned against him in the saddle, her breathing shallow but steady. Her shawl clung to her skin, soaked dark. Her eyes were open, though, scanning the narrow trail ahead that spilled into an open wash of pale rock and low grass. They'd reached the rim. The world beyond stretched wide, trembling with light, as if unsure whether to storm or shine. Colt slowed the horse to a walk. The path was too exposed now. No trees, no boulders to crouch behind, just open space and bad odds. He felt her fingers tighten on the saddle horn. They'll come through that draw, she said quietly, voice barely louder than the rainfall. He followed her gaze. A low ravine curled between 2 hills like a funnel for trouble. And their movement. 3 riders, maybe 4. Their coats dark against the gray sky, rifles slung casual across their backs. One of them lifted a spyglass. They saw us, Colt muttered. Naira's shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in resolve. Then we end here. He dismounted, rifle in hand, and helped her down. She staggered once, caught herself. Blood had started seeping again, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled the blade from beneath her belt and faced the hills like someone who'd already buried too many fears to start digging again. Colt led the horse behind a large slab of rock and scanned the land. Not much cover. Not much time. You can still run, he said, not looking at her. There's a ridge path, narrow, but it'll take you clear to the southern flats. And leave you? Her voice was dry. You'd be dead before I made the 3rd bend. He almost smiled. That your way of saying you care? That's my way of saying I don't owe you my life. Not after what yours has taken. He didn't argue, just handed her a second rifle, shorter, lighter. Her fingers closed around the stock like they knew the shape already. The posse drew nearer, dust and thunder in their wake. Leading them was Marshal Crowley, tall in the saddle, face sharp with lawless certainty. His badge glinted even in the cloudlight. When he saw them on the rise, he raised a hand. The others slowed, forming a wide arc around the base. "Bring her down," Crowley called. "She's got a bounty on her, and there ain't no mercy written into the price." Colt stepped out from the rock, rifle lower but firm. "She's not yours to take." Crowley squinted. "That you, Merrick?" "It is. I thought you disappeared into a bottle or a grave." "Almost did. You got no stake in this." Colt's voice never rose. "I do now." Crowley pulled his horse closer, the others following. "You stand between me and justice. You won't like what happens." "Then shoot." A long moment hung there, as still as the hush before lightning. Crowley didn't move. His hand twitched near his revolver, but he didn't draw. Killing a cowboy, white with war history with a name, was more mess than money. And deep down, even Crowley knew the truth. This wasn't justice. This was convenience dressed in law's clothes. Colt held his ground. Naira didn't move either. She watched Crowley like she'd seen men like him before. Chests puffed with power, hearts hollowed by fear. "You sure you want this fight?" Crowley asked. "No," Colt said, "but I'll take it." Rain slicked his rifle. His coat clung to his arms. Behind him, the canyon waited like a second mouth, one that could swallow any man whole. Crowley spat. "We'll be back." "You always are," Naira said. The marshal turned his horse with a jerk and led the others away. No shots fired. No bodies fallen. Just dust, hoofbeats, and the slow retreat of men too proud to die for a lie. Colt exhaled. His hands didn't tremble, but his knees nearly buckled when he turned. Naira was already sitting, back pressed to the rock, her breath catching in small, sharp gulps. He dropped beside her. "Let me see." She shook her head, eyes tight. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said, already unwrapping her shawl. The wound had reopened. Blood ran in ribbons down her side. She didn't cry out, just gritted her teeth, her gaze fixed on the sky like she didn't want him to see her break. "You're gonna make it," Colt said, pressing fresh cloth to cut. "You don't know that. I know you survived worse." She met his eyes then, not with hope, but with defiance. "I remember every face I've lost." "Then live," he whispered. So they weren't lost for nothing. Silence settled between them, broken only by the rain and the quiet, rhythmic heartbeat of two souls unlearning what it meant to be alone. Later, they found shelter in a crumbled stone cabin. Roof half collapsed, chimney split, but walls enough to block the wind. Colt built a fire from dry branches and watched the flame catch with stubborn heat. Naira lay on a bed of wool and burlap, her skin pale but warm beneath his touch. He sat beside her, hat in his lap, eyes flickering with the kind of tenderness men like him rarely showed. "You could have left," she said. "So could you." She looked at him for a long while, then reached up and brushed dirt from his cheek with a shaking hand. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was something older, something earned. Colt leaned back, staring into the fire, voice low. "I used to think redemption was a word preachers threw around to keep dying men from screaming, but now I think it's smaller than that." "What is it then?" "A choice. One you make every day, even when nobody sees it." Rain tapped the roof above like a second heartbeat. Outside, the canyon lay quiet, the sky no longer heavy. Colt shifted closer. "Sleep. I'll watch." Naira's hand found his, weak but sure. "You already did." He looked down at their hands, fingers interlaced, dirt under the nails, blood still fresh. Two lives tangled by chance and choice. She closed her eyes. He didn't. Outside, beyond the smoke and the rain, the world kept spinning like it hadn't just been changed. And somewhere down the trail, Crowley would return, with more men, more guns, more reasons. But for tonight, they were still breathing. And sometimes, in a world like this, that was enough.